Story number 1. I once met this guy named Matt when I was out at a bar with friends one summer. It was a big group of us, and Matt and I ended up bonding at the bar over the Cubs game that was playing on TV. We were both cheering, vibing, and just casually talking sports like we'd known each other for a while. As we got more into conversation, my group kind of drifted away. So it wasn't like Matt really interacted with any of my friends. It was just the two of us hanging out near the bar, talking and laughing. Eventually, we exchanged Instagrams. He had a decent following and his feed made him seem like a normal guy in his 20s, into travel, staying active, and going out. Nothing weird or off-putting, just a regular dude. After we swapped info, I went to go find my group again. Honestly, when you bro out with another guy at a bar, there's like a 90% chance you never talk again. You always say you'll hit each other up, but by the next day, once you're sober, the interest just isn't there. That's what I expected to happen. But the next day, Saturday, I was out again. This time, it was for my friend Tyler's birthday. We went to an outdoor bar and restaurant right on the water. It was a nice spot, warm weather, laid-back vibe. While we were at the bar singing for Tyler, I posted something to my Instagram story. Just a quick video of everyone cheering and celebrating. About an hour later, after we'd finished dinner and were hanging around the outside section of the bar, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and it was Matt. He smiled, dabbed me up, and said this was actually his favorite Saturday night spot. It caught me off guard a little. I didn't tag the location in my story, so it wasn't like I broadcasted where I was. But I figured it was just a coincidence. I turned to my friends and introduced him more officially this time. "Hey, you guys remember Matt?" I said. Even if they hadn't really talked to him the night before, they had at least seen him. Matt stuck around for a while. It was fine, everyone was drinking, including him, and the whole vibe was relaxed and fun. The next time I saw Matt was about a week later. He invited me to go golfing with him on a hot Sunday morning. I'm not great at golf, but I've always wanted to get better, so I agreed to go. It was just the two of us. I actually tried to get a couple of my friends to come, but they were too hungover from the night before and said it was way too early. Matt and I actually vibed pretty well while golfing. I think we only played 9 holes and it took us around 2 hours to get through it. It wasn't super competitive, just chill, laid-back fun. Afterwards, we grabbed some food and then I headed home to relax before work the next day. I saw Matt one more time after that when we ran into each other out again. Not long after, he invited me on a hiking trip to Arizona. Honestly, the idea of Arizona and especially the Grand Canyon was a bucket list thing for me. So when he mentioned it, I was already half sold. I checked with work first to make sure I could get the time off. Once I confirmed I was good, it was an immediate yes from me. I asked Tyler and a couple of our other friends if they wanted to come along too, but they were hard no's. They said they couldn't get time off or they needed to save money. You know, the usual responses I get anytime I try to organize a trip with them. I asked Matt if any of his boys were going. He just laughed and said, "Nah, I'm going solo, dude." It struck me as a little odd, mainly because I hadn't met a single one of his friends yet. But his Instagram made him look like a super social guy. Lots of travel pics, people in the background, tagged locations, nothing that raised any red flags. We flew out on August 15th. The return flight back to Chicago was scheduled for August 18th. We landed late that night. Matt had already rented a car for the weekend, so after landing, we picked it up and made a quick stop for food and some alcohol before heading to the Airbnb. By the time we actually got there, it was late. We cracked a couple beers, sat around for a bit, and just hung out. I could tell Matt was down to stay up longer, maybe drink more or talk, but I was completely shot from the day. I told him I needed to crash. That's when I noticed there was only one bed in the Airbnb. I had never asked him about the sleeping arrangements. I just assumed there'd be 2 beds or at least 2 rooms. When I brought it up, he pointed at the couch I was already sitting on and said, "It's a pull-out couch." Then he added, "Relax, man, I'm not charging you for the Airbnb." Honestly, a free place to stay in Arizona? I wasn't going to complain. I pulled out the sofa bed, laid out the sheets, and crashed for the night. To my surprise, the couch was actually comfortable. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of Matt walking through the living room. He was headed to the kitchen to grab some water. I'm a really light sleeper. The sound of a pin drop can wake me up. I just rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, Matt woke me up early. The sun was already shining and the sky was crystal clear. It was a perfect day. We jumped in the car and headed straight for the Grand Canyon. I had no idea how massive it really was until I saw it in person. Pictures don't do it justice. What really surprised me was how many different trails there were to choose from. We decided to hike the Bright Angel Trail. I think that's when it hit me just how out of shape I was. Within the first half hour, I was already dripping sweat and breathing hard. Meanwhile, Matt was ahead of me, practically jogging, laughing, and calling back, "Come on, Ma." We took a bunch of breaks during the hike, mostly to take photos. And I mean a lot of photos. The views were incredible. Every angle looked like a postcard, and we couldn't stop ourselves from snapping picture after picture. Eventually, after hiking for 2 to 3 hours, we made it back to the car. I was starving. On the drive back, we stopped at a small deli for food. The ride back to Phoenix felt long, and by the time we got in, we were both wiped. We took a midday nap at the Airbnb to recharge. Later that evening, we got up and started exploring the city. And, of course, in true Matt fashion, we ended up bar hopping. I barely knew the guy, but one thing was already crystal clear. Matt loved to drink. Fast forward a few hours, and we were really drunk. Actually, I think I might have been even more gone than he was, and I have no clue how because Matt was throwing back drinks just as fast as I was. We ended up leaving the rental car on the street somewhere and called an Uber back to the Airbnb. It was super late by then. Time had slipped away without either of us noticing. I barely remember anything from that point other than Matt blasting music at the Airbnb for a bit while I plugged my phone in next to the couch. At some point, I just crashed. That night, I randomly woke up probably a couple hours after I fell asleep. My bladder felt like it was going to burst and my mouth was drier than the Grand Canyon itself. I got up off the couch and started making my way toward the bathroom. As I moved through the dark room, I heard something. It wasn't loud, just a subtle creak in the floor, like the sound of someone stepping lightly nearby. I paused, scanning around in the darkness, but I didn't see anything. Shrugging it off, I went to the bathroom. While I was in there midstream, I heard the sound of a door clicking shut. It was faint, but distinct. It had to be Matt's bedroom door. After I finished, I walked over to check. I tried the handle, but it was locked. I knocked softly. No response. Whatever. I was too tired to care at that point. I went back to the couch and fell asleep pretty quickly. The next morning, I woke up around 8 a.m., head pounding. Classic hangover. But something was off. The first thing I noticed was my phone. Last night, I had plugged it in and left it lying on the floor next to the pull-out bed. But now it was sitting unplugged on the table beside the couch. It wasn't where I had left it. I tried to come up with a reason. Maybe I moved it without remembering. I was drunk enough to do something like that and not recall. So I let it go. That day, there was no chance I was going hiking again. Just the thought of physical activity made me feel sick. Instead, we called an Uber to retrieve the rental car, and then we spent the day driving around. We explored different neighborhoods, checked out the scenery, and even visited the botanical gardens. I didn't really want to drink that day. My body was begging for a break. But later that evening, Matt managed to convince me. And wouldn't you know it, we ended up getting drunk again. Really drunk. Our flight was scheduled for around 1 p.m. the next day, so at least we didn't have to wake up early. But still, by the time we got back to the Airbnb, it was somewhere between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the morning. This time, Matt insisted I sleep in the bed. He said it was only fair, since I'd taken the couch the previous 2 nights. I didn't argue. I was exhausted. I grabbed my bag, brought it into his room, said goodnight, and then shut the door behind me. Keep up. I didn't lock the door that night. Not that it would have mattered. The door had one of those old-school knobs with a basic lock, the kind you could open with a butter knife if you really wanted to. It wasn't exactly Fort Knox. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that we went home the next day in peace. But that's not what happened. I woke up sometime later that night, probably not long after I'd fallen asleep. It wasn't like I consciously heard a noise. It was more like one of those moments when your body reacts before your brain catches up, like something pulled me out of sleep, even though I wasn't fully aware of what. I sat up slowly, still groggy, and instinctively looked around the dark room. Then I looked for my phone. It was gone. I had plugged it in next to the bed and left it lying on the mattress beside me. But now the charging cord was dangling loosely from the outlet to the floor, completely disconnected with no phone in sight. I froze. How could this happen again? I leaned over one side of the bed, searching the floor. Then I checked the other side. And that's when I screamed. Matt was laying on the floor beside the bed, face down, sprawled out like he had just collapsed there. His body was limp, his breathing heavy. At the sound of my scream, he stirred, lifting his head slowly like he was waking up from a deep, heavy sleep. I shouted at him, "What are you doing?" He looked around the room, blinking in confusion like he didn't know where he was or how he got there. He mumbled something about being so drunk he must have wandered into the room thinking it was his. Then he claimed he remembered I was already in the bed, so he just crashed on the floor instead. But it didn't add up. He was on the far side of the bed farthest from the door. If he just stumbled in and crashed, he wouldn't have made it past the bed to lie there. I glared at him. "Did you take my phone?" He acted dumb. Totally innocent. He told me to check under the bed, maybe it fell. Then, without waiting for me, he got on his knees and looked underneath. Almost instantly, he said, "Bro, here it is." He pulled the phone out from under the bed and handed it to me. I stared at him. And in that moment, I genuinely felt like I was looking at a different person. Like I had no idea who this guy really was. Did he seriously try to get into my phone again? I told him I'd just go sleep on the couch. But he insisted he would. Then, without another word, he left the room. This time, you bet your ass, I locked the door. If it weren't for the phone, I might have brushed it off. Maybe he was just really drunk and did something dumb, like pass out on the floor. But this wasn't just a goofy mistake. He had taken my phone. Again. And I knew it. Despite everything, I was still a little drunk myself. And somehow, I managed to fall back asleep. But it didn't end there. I woke up one final time that night. And this time, I immediately understood why. Matt was standing at the foot of the bed. I couldn't see him clearly. Just his silhouette outlined against the faint light filtering through the room. And for some reason, I didn't scream. Not right away. He moved slowly. Then he sat down on the edge of the bed and started rubbing my foot. That's when I snapped out of it. I screamed at him, "Get out!" He didn't move. I had to physically push him. I shoved him off the bed and forced him out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. I didn't even hesitate after that. I started packing immediately. Clothes, toiletries, everything I had brought with me. He didn't say a word. Just he sat upright on the couch the whole time I packed. Just watching me, not saying a single word. It was like something out of a horror game, like a creepy NPC stuck in a loop. His blank stare followed me around the room, completely still except for his eyes. It was the most unsettling part of the entire trip. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't give him a chance to explain. I just grabbed my stuff, walked outside, and called an Uber to the airport. There was no way I was staying in that Airbnb another minute. He didn't follow me, didn't try to stop me. When I got to the airport, the sun was just starting to rise. That warm orange glow that should have felt peaceful didn't. My chest was tight, my mind racing. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fall asleep. I sat there in the terminal in a daze, just waiting. I didn't even check my phone beyond booking a new seat on the flight. I paid like $35 just so I wouldn't have to sit next to him. When it came time to board, I kept my eyes fixed out the window. I didn't want to make eye contact. Not with him. Not even for a second. The flight felt long, even though it wasn't. When I got home, I didn't tell anyone right away. I needed time. Time to process what had happened. Time to wrap my head around how a fun trip with the boys had turned into something disturbing. Later that day, I told a few friends. Some of them didn't seem surprised. "See? I told you he was weird," one of them said. Another pointed out how both times we'd randomly run into Matt, he was completely alone. Not a single friend. It started to click for me then. That second night at the outdoor bar, he hadn't just stumbled into us. He'd seen my Instagram story. He knew where I was. And he showed up. That wasn't coincidence. That was stalker behavior. I blocked his number, blocked his Instagram. But before I did, I got curious. I went to one of his older posts, one where he was supposedly hanging with friends. No one was tagged in the photo. But there was one comment from a guy who looked like he was in the picture. I clicked on his profile. He wasn't following Matt, and Matt wasn't following him. I decided to DM him. All I asked was, "Hey, are you still friends with Matt?" The guy responded within 10 minutes. "Nah, guy's a freak. Run away." That's what he said. Run away. He went on to tell me that he and a bunch of other guys had to cut Matt off. Each one of them had their own weird or uncomfortable experience. This guy had even untagged himself from that picture. He told me I can't get him to take the photo down, but I don't want to be associated with him. When I told him what happened in Arizona, he wasn't even surprised. His exact words? "Guy should be in jail." It hit me then, just how dangerous this trip could have been. Matt had seemed so normal. Just a chill dude looking to make a new friend. I thought we'd broed out over anything haunts me the most. T stood there in the living room completely silent. Story number 2. This happened last summer around mid-July. I was home from college for a few weeks, just trying to enjoy the break before the next semester started. My name's Kyle, and I live in Maryland. I had been texting with my 2 closest friends, Jason and Marcus, trying to figure out a way we could hang out, just the 3 of us. Like old times? We all go to different colleges now, so it's rare we get that kind of time together. Eventually, we decided on a weekend beach trip to Ocean City. Jason's family owns a small beach house out there that they don't use often, and he managed to get permission for us to stay for a few days. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple 2-bedroom place a couple blocks from the sand, but it was perfect for what we needed. Just time to relax, catch up, and maybe party a bit. We drove down on a Friday afternoon. The weather was classic midsummer, hot, upper 80s, and that thick, humid air that clings to your skin. The second we pulled into town, you could smell it. Sunscreen, salt water, boardwalk food. Ocean City in peak season. We spent that first day just wandering the boardwalk, hitting up a few arcades, people watching, and messing around like we used to. The beach was packed. Kids running around with beach balls, families setting up umbrellas and coolers, and lifeguards constantly blowing whistles at people who wandered into restricted areas. It felt normal. The kind of day you picture when you think of a classic summer. Later that evening, we went back to the house, grilled some burgers, cracked open a few drinks, and started playing drinking games in the living room. By midnight, we were buzzed, maybe even drunk, and starting to get bored. That's when someone, maybe Marcus, suggested we head back to the beach. There's something weirdly appealing about the ocean at night. It's quieter. The beach is nearly empty. The air cools down, and there's a kind of peaceful stillness you don't get during the day. We didn't bring much. Just hoodies in case it got cold, our phones, and a flashlight Jason grabbed from the kitchen drawer. We weren't planning to swim or do anything crazy. Just hang out. Maybe walk along the shore for a bit. We took a side street down to the boardwalk, then followed the wooden planks until we hit the steps leading to the sand. Just like we expected, it was almost completely deserted. The waves rolled in steady and slow, and the only light came from a few boardwalk lamps and the moon slipping in and out of the clouds. It was barely bright enough to see where the shoreline ended and the ocean began. But instead, I ended up on a trip with a guy who tried to access my phone twice, rubbed my foot in the middle of the night, and stood silently at the foot of my bed like some shadow. I still don't know what he was trying to find on my phone, and that, more than anything else, was what made the whole experience unforgettable and terrifying. Back at the beach that night, we walked along the edge of the surf. The cold water would hit our ankles every now and then. We joked around, talked about random stuff, and just killed time. After a while, we stopped near one of the lifeguard towers. Those wooden towers that they always take down at night. We laid back in the sand and stared up at the sky. That's when Jason suddenly sat up. He pointed toward the shoreline and said, "Is that someone walking over there?" We all sat up and looked in the direction he was pointing. At first, I didn't see anything, just a dark blur near the water's edge. But then I saw it, a figure, a silhouette, slowly walking right along where the water met the sand, about 50 or 60 yards away. We thought it was just someone else out late, maybe going for a walk like us. But then we noticed something was wrong. Their movement was off. Their walk was stiff, slow, almost mechanical. Their arms didn't swing naturally. Their posture was strange. Their head was tilted down, but not fully. It looked like they were staring at the sand, or maybe scanning it. They weren't strolling or enjoying the beach. We all stopped talking and just quietly watched. Something about it made me uneasy. I whispered, "What the hell are they doing?" Marcus said maybe they were just looking for something. Jason joked that it was probably a drunk tourist who dropped their keys. We laughed it off and went back to messing around. But I kept glancing back at the person. A few minutes passed. Then I noticed they had stopped moving. They weren't walking anymore. They were standing completely still, now maybe 30 yards away. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. We tried not to stare or shine our flashlight at them, but it was getting hard to ignore. There was just something off. Marcus finally said, "They've been standing there for like 5 minutes. Who just stands like that?" Then Jason said something that made my stomach drop. He said, He's not just standing, he's looking at you, Kyle. I didn't know if he was joking or not. I kind of laughed nervously and said, "Nah, he's looking at the sand." But Jason shook his head. "No, look closer. His head's tilted at you," he said. That's when Jason pointed the flashlight at him. Honestly, I didn't want him to do that, but he clicked it on and aimed the beam. The light hit the figure for just a second before the battery started dying and flickered out. That brief flash was enough. I saw him. He was almost grayish-white and he wasn't wearing a shirt. His jeans were soaked, clearly wet from the ocean. His arms hung completely limp at his sides. His head was tilted at a strange angle, not broken but unnatural. And his eyes were wide open, almost bulging. The second that beam of light hit him, he moved. Fast. Without any hesitation, he broke into a full sprint straight at us. I can't even describe how unnatural it looked. There was no build-up. We all stopped talking and just quietly watched. Something about it made me uneasy. I whispered, "What the hell are they doing?" Marcus said maybe they were just looking for something. Jason joked that it was probably a drunk tourist who dropped their keys. We laughed it off and went back to messing around. But I kept glancing back at the person. A few minutes passed. Then I noticed they had stopped moving. They weren't walking anymore. They were standing completely still, now maybe 30 yards away. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. We tried not to stare or shine our flashlight at them, but it was getting hard to ignore. There was just something off. Marcus finally said, "They've been standing there for like 5 minutes. Who just stands like that?" Then Jason said something that made my stomach drop. He said, "He's not just standing, he's looking at you, Kyle." I didn't know if he was joking or not. I kind of laughed nervously and said, "Nah, he's looking at the sand." But Jason shook his head. "No, look closer. His head's tilted at you," he said. That's when Jason pointed the flashlight at him. Honestly, I didn't want him to do that, but he clicked it on and aimed the beam. The light hit the figure for just a second before the battery started dying and flickered out. That brief flash was enough. I saw him. He was almost grayish-white and he wasn't wearing a shirt. His jeans were soaked, clearly wet from the ocean. His arms hung completely limp at his sides. His head was tilted at a strange angle, not broken but unnatural. And his eyes were wide open, almost bulging. The second that beam of light hit him, he moved. Fast. Without any hesitation, he broke into a full sprint straight at us. I can't even describe how unnatural it looked. There was no build-up. He went from standing completely still to running at full speed like he launched forward. All three of us screamed and bolted. We didn't even look back. We just ran. I could hear Marcus yelling behind me, "Go!" Our feet pounded hard into the sand. My lungs were burning. We ran all the way back to the steps leading up to the boardwalk. We didn't stop until we got to the street. Only then did we turn around. But he wasn't there. The beach was empty. No footprints behind us. Just the sound of the waves crashing. We stood there frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. We didn't talk much on the walk back to the house. When we got inside, we locked every door and window, pulled the blinds shut tight, and stayed up until the sun came up. None of us could sleep. I kept expecting to hear knocking or to see the pale face outside the window. But thankfully, it never came. The next morning, we tried to laugh it off. Say it was probably just some cracked-out homeless guy trying to scare people. But deep down, none of us believed that. The way he moved, the way he appeared out of nowhere, the lack of footprints. It made no sense. We stayed one more night, but we didn't leave the house. We left early the next morning. Over the next few weeks, we all tried to move on. But then one night, Jason texted me. He said he'd been having dreams. The same dream over and over again. He'd wake up and see the guy standing in the corner of his room, soaking wet, head tilted, just staring at him. No movement, no talking, just standing there. I told him that was messed up, but I didn't tell him that I was having the exact same dream. Everything was the same. The guy, the posture, just standing in my room, not moving, not talking. Sometimes, I wake up thinking I hear wet footsteps in my hallway. But when I check, no one's there. Then, last week, almost a year later, I was scrolling through a local Facebook group. It's a group where people post about stuff going on in Ocean City. Someone uploaded a photo they'd taken the night before from the beach. It was grainy and dark, but I recognized what they were talking about. The caption said, "Does anyone know who this creepy guy is that I saw standing by the water at like 1 a.m.? I clicked the photo. It was blurry, but I recognized him instantly. Same posture, same pale skin. He was just looking down at the water. The comments chilled me even more. There were dozens of people saying they'd seen him too. Some said he was there for hours. One person said they watched him walk into the water and never come back out. Another said they found wet footprints on their back porch 2 streets from the beach. No prints leading to or from them. I don't know what we saw that night, but I know this. I'll never go back to that beach at night again." Story number 3. I grew up in Massachusetts, and every summer for as long as I can remember, I spent the 3 months in a classic coastal New England town. You know the type if you've been around that area of the country, small, charming, with salty air and old docks stretching into the water. I had a big group of friends who always did the same things each summer. After our respective jobs during the day, we'd meet up and get into all kinds of shenanigans. I was 19 years old when this story happened, just like most of my friends at the time. I had just finished a summer job as a dock boy. So, like any other night, I texted my friends to figure out the plan. Then I picked up my buddy Emerson, that's what I'll call him, from his job. Emerson was the one with the fake ID, so naturally, he was in charge of buying the alcohol. We grabbed some beers and headed back to the small town where we all lived. Once back, we decided to take out my family's boat. Since I was allowed to take it out on my own, it was the perfect spot to hang out while we waited for the rest of the crew to finish up their things. We cruised around the little peninsula, heading to a popular spot where a bunch of people usually anchored their boats and just hung out. It was about 7 p.m. and a couple of boats were already anchored there, nothing unusual for that time of day. We found a spot right between 2 of them, dropped the anchor, and just chilled with some beers. The music from the boat on our left was playing, adding to the vibe. Then, the boat on our right started to leave. Eventually, the other boat's music shut off too. We figured they were about to leave as well. Emerson and I, both a little drunk, started groaning and yelling at the empty space, hoping someone would turn the music back on and keep the party going. We said a bunch of dumb stuff like that, but nothing happened. We sat on the bow, took a few more drinks, and then Emerson suddenly said, "Dude, look." I turned around to look at the boat and saw 3 people standing right at the edge, just staring at us. At first, I laughed it off. I was drunk, and it seemed like no big deal. But Emerson kept his eyes locked on them, his expression growing more serious by the second. Now, I've never been the type to sense danger quickly. I'm usually pretty optimistic and lighthearted about most things. But Emerson was clearly uncomfortable. I told him not to worry, they were probably just curious or trying to get a better look or something. But he didn't shake it off. He stayed tense, his eyes never leaving those figures. It was pretty dark by now. There wasn't much light except from their boat's dim lamps, so we couldn't really see who they were, just shadowy silhouettes standing there silently. After a couple of minutes trying to get Emerson to relax, I looked back again and saw they hadn't moved. They were still standing in exactly the same spot, staring right at us. I thought it was some kind of joke or prank. So I grabbed the megaphone from the compartment above the steering wheel and called out, "20 to watch, fellas." Emerson immediately looked pissed off. He could tell something wasn't right. I was putting the megaphone back when I heard one of them laugh. It was a man's laugh, but there was something really off about it. It was slow, low, and raspy, almost sinister. That's when I started to feel genuinely uneasy. Emerson stood up and said, "Let's get the hell out of here, bro. This ain't right." But I told him to calm down, said we were fine. Then we heard 2 splashes in the water coming from their direction. And suddenly only one silhouette was left standing on the boat. That was the last straw for Emerson. He jumped up and started pulling up the anchor right away. Meanwhile, I was still laughing, thinking it was all just ridiculous. He tried telling me to start the engine, but I was cracking up, watching him pull the anchor while I took a swig of my beer. Looking back now, I can't believe how stupid I was being. I was laughing so hard that I didn't even notice the sound of 2 people swimming close to our boat. Then Emerson suddenly paused, holding the anchor in his hands, and looked at me with wide eyes. That made me stop too. It was dark, and with our boat's lights off, we couldn't see anything in the water. I called out hello, but there was no answer. Even the sound of the splashing stopped. Right after that, I heard Emerson yell, "Oh." Then I heard a splash behind me. I turned just in time to see someone trying to climb onto the back of our boat. I completely freaked out. While fumbling to turn the key, I caught sight of a hand grabbing the railing near Emerson. He was yelling and holding the anchor up, ready to fight whoever it was. I finally got the engine started and slammed the throttle forward. The boat immediately hit a sandbar right in front of us with a harsh bump. I quickly put it in reverse and gunned it backwards as fast as I could until we were out of the bay and into open water. I threw it into neutral and Emerson and I just looked at each other. He started giving me the classic "I told you so" and called me a dumbass. I didn't argue. I agreed that we should head back. In hindsight, we should have rushed straight to the boat docks near my house. But instead, we decided to gather up all the stuff we'd thrown around during our chaotic escape. We hadn't even finished when I noticed bright lights approaching fast from the direction we'd just come from. I said, "No way," jumped back to the steering wheel, and hit full throttle again. Our boat was old and didn't go very fast, but no matter how hard I pushed, the other boat was gaining on us quickly. Emerson started freaking out, yelling things like, "Who are these guys? What do they want? Why can't they just let us chill on the water?" I told him to calm down and focused on getting us back to the docks as fast as possible. After about 5 tense minutes, the docks were in sight, but the boat behind us was so close, we could see its bow bobbing up and down with the waves. I honestly didn't know what to do. Suddenly, I swerved hard left and got as close to the shore as I dared, without beaching the boat. Miraculously, the other boat peeled off and headed in the opposite direction. We both breathed a huge sigh of relief, but I still slammed the throttle and raced full speed back to the docks. When we finally docked, I was relieved there was no damage to the boat. Later, we met up with our friends and told them everything that had happened. We came up with some theories. Maybe those guys wanted to rob us, or maybe they wanted to steal the boat. We didn't recognize their boat at all, so they probably weren't locals. I don't like to think about what could have happened if things had gone worse. I'm just grateful we never had to find out. Most of all, I'm thankful Emerson was there with me. Without his constant skepticism and quick reaction, I'm pretty sure things could have taken a very bad turn.